Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the ETJ English podcast with me, Elliot. And if you're watching on YouTube, a double hello because you can see me. You don't have to watch on YouTube. You can just listen if you prefer. I just thought I'd start posting the podcast episodes here on YouTube now as well. My YouTube's been a bit quiet recently. I upload a lot of short form content, so that's where you'll find a lot of the pronunciation teaching stuff now. I just find that the long videos, I've kind of done everything, right? I've almost done every sound, every aspect of the accent. So I feel like now you'll be seeing a lot more of the podcast here on the channel. But of course, if you ever ask or request some pronunciation lessons, some ideas for me, I will take them on board and I'll see if I can put them on the YouTube channel. But I know that so many of you love the podcast. There are people always asking me to make more episodes, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for all of the comments and messages and emails you send me regarding the podcast and the things I do here. So, think about your goal. As I always say, if you are here to learn, then what are you trying to improve? Is it your intonation today? Is it your vowel sounds? Is it a specific vowel sound? Or are you trying to improve your English listening practice? Or are you just here to chill out and have fun? I've had people contact me throughout the week saying that they listen to this podcast when they're tidying their house, when they're at the gym, so many different situations. So remember, although I am a pronunciation coach, it doesn't mean you have to come here to learn. This is a place to chill out and relax if you want to. So, let's talk about, actually, I didn't plan to talk about this, but let's talk about shadowing very briefly. I'll give you a very quick step-by-step guide on how you can use shadowing to improve your English, particularly your pronunciation. Because many of you know, as well as just everyday people, I also work with actors, people who are preparing for auditions, who need to memorize a script in a specific accent, whether that be my speciality, which is a modern RP accent, or whether it might be a Scottish accent or an American accent or even an Australian accent. We work through the aspects of the accent together. And one piece of advice I give to a lot of my actors and to my students who are members of the course is that shadowing can be very, very effective, but only if you do it in the right way and the right amount. So we shouldn't overdo shadowing. I don't think it's something you should do every day. I think it's something you should do more once or twice a week. You should focus more on your own spontaneous speech and trying to improve the things that you're working on in that sense. But when you are doing shadowing, it's a great way to pick up habits and techniques which native speakers have. So step one would be finding a speaker that you love the sound of, whether that's me or somebody else, a celebrity, whoever it might be, and find a video, a podcast, something preferably that you can watch. The watching is very important, and I'll tell you why in a second. But the first step is just to familiarize yourself with maybe 5 to 10 seconds of this video that you're watching. So 5 to 10 seconds of them speaking freely in a very casual way. Try not to pick something that's from a movie, for example, because they're performing. They're doing what you're doing. They're trying to pronounce things in a different way. What we want to do is listen to somebody speaking in a very natural environment. So a podcast, an interview, whatever it might be, and just pick a 5 to 10 second part of that interview or clip or whatever it might be. And the next step is to memorize it so you know what the words are. You could write them down, or you could just try to copy them. Keep replaying this clip and try to copy exactly how they're pronouncing the sounds. How is the melody going? And a great place to start is with the melody, with the intonation. So you just heard me then. You can practice just by humming and using your hands to copy the rise and the fall, rise, fall. Copy that with your hand and with your voice. Then start adding the sounds. Pay attention to sounds which you find difficult, sounds you've been working on. And then bring it all together. Keep replaying the clip and copy how they are saying it. Every aspect, or a certain aspect you're working on, like the I sound, for example. Step 2 is the interesting one. What we're going to do now is turn the sound off. Turn the sound off and keep replaying the clip, but watch it. Watch the mouth movements. This is something that people forget a lot, because when we try to copy accents or copy people's pronunciation, yes, we're copying the way it sounds, but we're not paying attention to the movement of the mouth, of the lips. How far back? Are they really tight back in the throat? Or are they more forwards, more breathy at the front of the mouth? Pay attention to the lip movements. For example, British pronunciation, particularly RP, Americans say about us that it looks like we're chewing on a hot potato when we're speaking, because there's a lot of this oh, ah, lots of opening and closing of the mouth. So pay attention to that and just copy the mouth movements. You can do this with sound or without sound, but make sure there's no sound playing in the video. So whether you use your voice or not, it doesn't matter. But eventually you want to join all of it together. Voice, mouth movements, intonation, sounds, all of it. And the final step, this is where the psychology comes into it. You're going to start replaying that clip again, the clip that you've been copying. But instead of copying them, I want you to imagine that they are copying you. So every time you play the clip, it's after you've spoken. You should have practiced and memorized this clip enough now and practiced it enough that you're the expert and the person speaking is mimicking you. That is the trick. And this will create that psychology and build the confidence as well. Because it's also how you carry yourself and how you feel when you speak that matters. I mean, there are many different aspects to shadowing, but that's my general advice. The best thing you can do is this 3-step method. Listen, copy, repeat, intonation and sounds, and stress, of course, which words are being emphasized. Step 2, turn the sound off, copy the mouth movements, start trying to add the voice. Then, step 3, make them copy you. Reverse psychology. And that's it. So I was having a conversation with a student the other day, a member of my course. And just in case you aren't familiar with how it works, it's an online course where you have all of the content for the British accent, RP, accent reduction, all of the sounds, everything. But included with it is WhatsApp support, where you send me voice messages, questions, practice, and conversation. So the reason I'm mentioning this is because I was talking to one of my German students the other day, because what we do is usually they'll send me a recording. Someone will send me a recording, and then I will listen. I'll provide the feedback at the beginning of my response, and then continue the conversation if there is any. So some students are quite chatty. We have talks every single day with some of them, and other days, maybe some students just send me a practice recording, right? Now, this German guy, we've been talking for a while. And we've shared a lot about our childhood and growing up because we realized we had a few similarities, but also many differences. We're the same age. We're both 31. And we were talking a lot about growing up. What was it like growing up in Germany compared to the UK, and kind of sharing our experiences? And I thought this would be quite a good idea. Well, actually, he said it would be a good idea for the podcast to maybe share some of the things I've shared. And if you are one of my students, you may have heard some of these stories already. So it might be a bit of a memory for some of you who may have worked with me years ago and we haven't spoken in a while. But yeah, I thought I'd share some of these stories today. So what was it really like growing up as a millennial in the UK? I think the main thing I would say about being a millennial, so I think the main thing I'd say is the fact that we were outdoors a lot. It was this time where, when I was a child, well, we just didn't have as much technology as we have now. Technology has massively changed to the point now where everything can be done with your phone. When I was a kid, we didn't really even have web browsers on our phones. So we didn't have Safari, for example. I remember when the first iPhone came out, and it felt really weird because we could actually use like a web browser on the phone. I remember using it at school and thinking, this is strange, because I remember before, I think it cost money every time you went on any kind of web browser on like an old flip phone. So of course, before the iPhone, before all of this stuff happened, we were outside more. We would meet our friends by calling on our house phone, which to many of you might still be normal. But of course, in the West, in the UK, it's very different now. Kids are getting phones really young, which I don't know how I feel about that. But, we would just arrange to meet up, and you had to meet at that time. You had to, because that's what you agreed to when you last saw each other or when you spoke on the house phone. the landline. That's what we call it, the landline. I don't have a landline in my house. We all just use mobiles. Anybody who comes to my house, my parents in their house, they don't have a landline anymore. It's just not a thing. So we spent a lot of time outside. Particularly for me, it was skateboarding. So I used to go out with my skateboard and meet my friend who would also bring his skateboard or his BMX bike. And we'd just explore. We'd go into the woods and we'd do, all kinds of things, like the sort of stuff that you'd read in a book about childhood, But I feel like nowadays that's less common. You're more likely to meet up with kids, like with your friends online, playing video games. Fortnite obviously changed the world. It made so many kids addicted to playing things online with their friends, which I think is also great, but in moderation, right? I had some of the best memories of my life going out on my skateboard or my mountain bike and just exploring, making dams in the river, throwing rocks in lakes and watching them skim, across the water. Things like this, I just have little memories in my mind of this as a kid, and I love it. We used to always go to the corner shop, which is an interesting bit of vocabulary for you. We have many different words for this. Back in the day, like my dad's era, we actually had quite a racially inappropriate term for this type of shop. But so I won't share that with you, obviously. But there was a type of shop which was a corner shop. It essentially is a shop which would be on the corner of a street, selling papers, newspapers or magazines and sweets and chocolates, just your everyday things. So we often called them a corner shop. We still do. And the other word my dad used to say, the paper shop. And I really used to look forward to my trips with my dad to the paper shop to go and get a small chocolate bar, a Freddo. I don't know if Freddos exist in your country, but these were famous back in the day. All kids loved them. It's just like a small frog chocolate. I think it's made by Dairy Milk, which is our kind of famous chocolate company here. So I remember doing this. My dad would buy a newspaper, and I just remember summer days walking to the shop with my dad and the dog and coming back home. Maybe we'd have something planned for the day, but I guess when we look back on our childhood, everything seems kind of relaxed. If you had a comfortable childhood, of course, different for everybody. But the main things I remember from my proper childhood, besides riding bikes, knocking on my friends' doors to ask them to come out and play, skateboarding. I'm looking through my notes. I had corner shops, but then eventually I was slowly introduced to things like the PlayStation. And there were three games actually, which completely changed my life and turned me into a proper gamer when I was a kid. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, it's a skateboarding game. And this is where I really began to find my music taste, because it was full of angry punk rock and metal songs. The skateboarding was insane. I started to idolize people like Bam Margera, Tony Hawk. I would play the Tony Hawk skateboarding game, but then I would also switch over onto WWF wrestling games. And this is where I found my love for wrestling. And I still watch wrestling to this day. It's my guilty pleasure. Every week I watch SmackDown and Raw. I know I'm a complete nerd, and so many people, when they find out, like when they see my videos and they realize, I'm a pronunciation teacher, they're quite shocked when they find out I listen to heavy metal music and I watch wrestling. Yeah, never judge a book by its cover, I guess. But yeah, Tony Hawk's and WWF, and there was one more game, which was Crash Bandicoot. I don't know if any of you played this game as well. It was like a platformer game where you had to jump over things and collect apples. This was such a nostalgic game, and I used to play this all of the time with my sister. Just good times. But the thing is, we didn't play it too much because these games were quite limited. And one thing I want to talk about now, even I struggle with this, because when I get time, I do still play video games from time to time, when I have the time, which isn't very often. When I do, I feel like mind blown. There are too many games. Too many things to choose from. But back then when I was younger, and I'm not saying it was better then, I'm just saying it was different. When I was younger, I wasn't as stressed. Number one, because I was younger, but also because you would buy a game and that would be your game. That would be your game for the next few months. But now it's like, oh, there's a new game, there's a new game, there's a new game, constantly new games coming out. And it's hard to pick to the point now where I get too stressed. And do you know, I have the same thing with Netflix as well. When it comes to choosing something to watch, I feel like I get stressed because there are too many things to choose from. And then I find myself looking at the reviews. I was excited to watch this. The trailer looked good, but the reviews are really bad. And I spend longer choosing what to watch than I do actually watching it. I did just finish Squid Game 3. Let me know your thoughts on that, by the way. Let me know. How did you find the ending, if you have watched it? I may have nearly shed a tear. It was very close. It's quite sad. Anyway, then, of course, I went to school. So I'm talking more about the summer holidays, but if we talk more about school, obviously that's different. So I'm going to briefly talk about the school system in the UK. It's kind of boring, but maybe you'll find it interesting because I've had a few students, again, on WhatsApp ask me to explain how it works. So I remember primary school and I remember secondary school. Primary school, I was very, very popular, believe it or not. It's very different in secondary school. In senior school, I was not popular at all. But primary school, I was athletic. I was very sporty. I was captain of the football team. You know, for a 7 to 10-year-old, I was doing all right, you know. And I was also quite good at the subjects at school, apart from maths. And that's something I've always struggled with, numbers. I hate numbers. If you're one of my students, you know I've talked probably to you about how much I hate numbers. So yeah, I was really bad with numbers, but I used to do a lot of athletic stuff and I used to play football on the weekends. Football was my thing. I was a massive Liverpool supporter. By the way, really sad what happened, of course, with Diogo Jota. If any of you heard the news, it's really, really sad. And it just shows that life is very short and we need to enjoy our lives. It's so sad that he just got married as well. Yeah, some people are just taken way too soon. So just thought I'd mention that because it's terrible. So I went to private school, private primary school and private secondary school. Is it good or is it not? How different is it to state school? Well, I had a lot of friends in state school because I liked skateboarding and I liked different things that maybe you wouldn't find many kids in private school enjoying. I was a bit rebellious once I got to secondary school. So I had a lot of friends in state schools who I used to skate with and listen to music with, go to concerts with. And the main comparisons we shared was that their classes were much bigger. So a state school is a free school, it's government funded, and usually the classes would be anything between 30 to maybe 50 students. So in an English lesson, you'd have like that many students. Now, I went to private school and the classes would be much smaller, anywhere from maybe 14 to 25 students in a lesson. They felt more intimate. And the good thing about that was you were paid attention to more. So the teachers would frequently ask you questions and come up to you and check how you're doing. So that was the one thing I think I needed. And I think that really helped me get to where I am now. But I know people who went to state school and they have done even better than me with their careers. They are successful, they're happy. So there's neither of them are better than the other. I think it sometimes just depends on the type of person. And I think some types of schools are more designed for certain people. But I am very thankful for my education and the school I went to. So some things I remember, particularly with secondary school. Secondary school, I was a loser. I didn't have many friends. I wore black all of the time, skinny jeans, black studded belts, band t-shirts. I didn't get bullied, but I was just very quiet and I was a loner. I just started to find what I liked, but it wasn't what everybody else liked. So most people in my school were into rap music and sports, and I wanted to play guitar and go to concerts on the weekend. And, you know, I just didn't really fit in. But it was okay. I had a couple of friends and we were kind of similar. So I didn't like secondary school at all, but I did learn a lot. And I don't think many people like school. So it's not exactly a surprise, is it? There was a lot of discipline. You know, we had to ask when we could take our jackets off. It was like Harry Potter, right? If you wanted to take your jacket, your blazer, your suit jacket off, you had to ask. You could only walk around the school in just a shirt and trousers in the summer. So that's when you were allowed to remove the jacket. So yeah, I started to get a bit rebellious. And then some of you know the story about when I broke both of my wrists. I talked about it on YouTube once. I fell out of a tree trying to impress a girl. I broke both my wrists and my nose. And I missed a lot of school because I couldn't write, right? I couldn't do anything. So I did miss quite a bit of time in school when I was about 14. So that's about it. But the teenage years were when I really found my fashion. So this was my real beginning of becoming a metalhead. When I was really young, like 5 or 6, I found bands like Linkin Park and Metallica, Slipknot, System of a Down. I've talked about these bands many times and how they influenced my life and who I am today. So once I kind of started going to secondary school, I wanted to show people that that was my thing. So my identity was wearing band t-shirts, and I used to use MySpace. And I remember we'd go to school, and the exciting thing would be coming home from school, going on the computer, dial-up connection, right? You used to make these beep, 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 beep noises when you had to load up the internet. It's not Wi-Fi. This was dial-up. I don't even know what the computer was doing, but it made these crazy noises. And then eventually 5 minutes later, you'd be on the internet. And I used to go on MSN, which was like an instant messenger. It's the equivalent of WhatsApp now, but we had to use it on the computer. And I used to talk to friends. I used to talk to girls from other schools. And this is where I used to find people who were similar to me through MySpace, or there was this website called Bebo. I don't know if you've heard of it before. These are, again, the equivalents of like Instagram and Facebook now. MySpace was the big one. This was especially for alternative people like me, like people who were into things like rock music. This is where you'd find like-minded people. And I used to even message bands on MySpace. I used to send messages on MySpace to bands and be like, hey, I love your music. And I remember when I got a reply from someone from a band, it was like a keyboard player in a band. And I was so excited. But anyway, I just remember spending a lot of time online, coming home from school, chatting to people, particularly girls, on MSN. And there was lots of hair flicking, lots of that. If you're watching me, you know what I'm talking about. I had a fringe. So I had this haircut where my hair was going over one eye, just like all of the emos had back then. And I used to flick my hair. Yeah. I was going for that aesthetic, that style. And to be honest, I haven't changed that much. I mean, my hairstyle is different and I dress a little bit more comfortably now. But, you know, I still go out in band t-shirts and I still listen to the same music. Yeah, I haven't changed that much. I don't talk to girls online, but I was always on a quest to find a new girlfriend. I think that was my main goal. There's this funny story. I met a girl through a friend when I was about 14. And we met up a few times. We used to hang out. We used to go and meet in fields and just hang out and sit together and talk and kiss and things like that, like you do when you're 14. And then I remember one day I met her and I was really excited to see her, but something was different. And it was her smell. She was a beautiful girl, honestly, from what I remember. And she used to dress really well. And she was very much my style, right? But she changed her perfume and I hated the smell of it. I remember holding her hands. I remember her hugging me and thinking like, oh God, I hate this smell. I'm sure it was a very nice perfume. I probably like it now, but back then I didn't. It's not my finest moment, but when I got home after hanging out with her, I sent her a text and broke up with her. And I just said it's not working or something. I can't really remember what I said. I was 14. But it was because I hated the smell of that new perfume. How silly was that? I'm such an idiot, honestly. But I just hated that smell. I can still kind of remember the smell as well. It's weird. Yeah, hanging out as teenagers, I would say the main thing we used to do, because technology was kind of taking over at this point. So we were all on YouTube, watching videos, sending each other cat videos. Because back then, that was all it was. It was the Numa Numa guy doing that Numa Numa dance. It was cat videos and not much else, to be honest, just people being silly on YouTube. There definitely weren't any English pronunciation teachers or anything like that going on. But yeah, it was the technology. So phones were banned in my school. You know, they were very strict about these things because they didn't know how to deal with it. Just like now, I'm seeing schools deal with the AI revolution. Are they embracing it? Are they avoiding it? Because kids are cheating on their homework using AI. But then we have to think, but the future is AI. So should they be using phones and AI at school? Should they? Because technically in the future, they'll probably be using it. Let me know what you think about that. Either email me and I can talk about it in the next episode about using AI in school. What do you think? And it kind of reminds me of the whole maths topic, because I hated maths, as you know. And when I think about it, I didn't really need to learn all of it. Why? Because phones were becoming popular and we just have calculators on our phones. We can just Google the answer. So I felt like maths lessons were a little bit like a waste of time at some points. Anyway, I don't know what you think about that. Going back to what I was talking about, which was the whole idea of, well, hanging out as a teenager. The main thing we used to do, because we couldn't go to bars or pubs or clubs, at 14, 15, 16 years old, we used to just hang out in fields. That's what we do. We go to parks or fields. We'd usually have to find the oldest looking person in our group of friends, and they'd go to the shop and they'd try and buy alcohol, maybe even cigarettes. And, there were other things as well, which I can't talk about, but rebellious behavior, right? And I remember this really memorable summer evening. And what happened was, so there was this disposable barbecue. This was something we used to do a lot as teenagers. And you're allowed to do it. You're allowed to have a disposable barbecue. So you'd go to Tesco or somewhere, which is like a supermarket, and you'd buy a grill, like a portable grill, disposable, right? And you'd buy some sausages, some burgers, and you'd hang out in a field and you'd cook it together. There was this one time where we did it in maybe a patch of grass that was a bit too long in this big field, very busy field as well, on a summer's day. I think we were about 17. We were all a bit drunk, which again is you shouldn't be doing at that age, but we did. That's what all teenagers do. We all start at about 14 in the UK because we have nothing better to do. We ended up accidentally, like the disposable barbecue kind of spread. And well, the next thing we knew, we were running away from a big ball of fire. Like the whole bush area was on fire. Now, I didn't have anything to do with this. I was just there, kind of part of the group, the quiet one, right? The kind of mysterious quiet dude that sits in the corner talking to one person. Like they thought it was really cool. And I was thinking, oh God, I feel really bad. The whole field is catching on fire because of this disposable barbecue we had. I was always kind of sensible deep down. I didn't want to seem that way, but that's how I was. So we all ran. And one of my friends actually felt so guilty that I think he emailed the council or something and said, I was part of this group who did this. He basically ratted on everyone. But we didn't get in trouble or anything. But there was some things that I can't tell you. There was a time where I had an altercation with police, but it was nothing major. I didn't do anything really bad. But this is what I'm talking about. As a teenager in the UK, growing up, especially my age group, your job was to get in trouble, really. That's kind of how we had fun. Of course, there were people who stayed at home and did revision and stuff like that. I wasn't one of those people until I got to about 18. It was the wrong friendship group. I was just hanging out with people who were quite naughty, I would say. But deep down, I think most of us were good kids, and that's the most important thing. So I was talking about how I was a metalhead, a skater, an emo, I don't know what you'd call me. But that was the stereotype. And everybody kind of dressed or listened to music or portrayed themselves in a certain way to match a stereotype. And that stereotypes were a huge thing. So to match a kind of group, a subculture within school. So before me, my dad's time, it was punks and rockers and I don't know what the others were, but you had different kind of genres of people. And then my age group, so millennials, it was, as I said, emos, which is kind of the group I was part of, like emos and skaters who liked rock music. And I've told you how I used to dress. And our enemies, the people we hated and they hated us, were the chavs. So chav is a very, very British word. It actually means council, houses, and violence. That's what it stands for. So basically, it's the sort of people who wear tracksuits, full tracksuits. They like football. They like to fight. I don't know. It's hard to explain. Maybe some of the girls would get pregnant very young, like 16. That was kind of the stereotype of a chav. And they hated people who liked rock music, right? They hated us. So we had a kind of rivalry with these people. We never really got into any fights or anything. I mean, it was private school. But, there was that rivalry and there were some arguments and things. You also had goths. I think goths still exist, right? They used to wear like the white makeup and black lipstick and eyeliner, long black hair, listen to certain bands again. So a bit more of a different version of an emo. There were preps as well, or preppies. So preps were a bit more like an American stereotype, but we had them here in the UK. And they would usually wear like a Ralph Lauren or Fred Perry polo shirt and chinos, and I don't know, they were very well spoken, they were very cool, maybe they liked surfing, that type of person. I'm sure you can imagine it from an American film. They were quite peaceful, so they kind of mixed with everybody in my school. And there were others, but those were kind of the main ones. You'd have your nerds as well, so the people who stereotypically looked like nerds and were nerds, and I always liked them. I got on with the nerds. But nowadays, I think the UK teen groups and stereotypes have changed. I think it's more aesthetic based now. So it's less about like a hardcore identity and having to do all like almost like a religion, like it was for us. We had to do certain things and act certain ways. I feel like it's a bit more fluid now, and it's definitely more based on social media. So for us, it was about the music we listened to that influenced the way that we dressed. But I feel like most of the time now with social media, modern teenagers, yes, music plays a part of it, but it's very much fashion and aesthetic based. So you have probably the modern version of a chav nowadays is a roadman. They're known for being drug dealers, but again, it's tracksuits, North Face jackets, balaclavas. You've probably seen videos of roadmen. If not, just search on Instagram roadman and you'll know what I'm talking about. It's very typical British stereotype. Gym lads, so guys who go to the gym, they're obsessed with the gym, all they talk about is the gym. And then, of course, I think the version of what I was, probably what you'd call them now, would be alt kids, like alternative kids. So people who like rock music and wear band t-shirts and dress in a more alternative way. I've heard of e-boys and e-girls. Not really sure what that is, but I've heard of it. And I guess there are other things as well. I feel like the whole stereotype thing has changed a lot. I mean, would you call someone even a stereotype now as an influencer or an influencer wannabe? I don't know. I feel like everything's changed now. I don't even know what stereotypes are like in modern teenage society. I'm glad I'm not going to school anymore now. I can imagine it being tough. But yeah, we all go through different things. I had a friend who was bullied at school. I remember sticking up for him a few times. And, it's some people go through a really hard time at school. Some people have an easy time. But what truly is an easy time at school? Is it being popular and being cool and not getting bullied? Is that an easy time at school? Or is a good, easy time at school being smart, working hard, getting things done, being intelligent and focusing on your education? What is success at school? Because I feel like the purpose of school is to educate you. But the thing I noticed from being a teenager was that school felt to me like prison, in the sense that you had to fit in, or you had to try and, I don't know, if you were different, it was harder. And it's so hard to explain, but it felt more like a social survival more than it did exams and all the other things. So I look back on it now and realize that, but at the time I just saw it as another day at prison. That's what it was like for me. I definitely have a lot of empathy for anybody going to school, particularly because of the time I went through, being different and not kind of being part of the main crowd. Anyway, then, we kind of grew up and started to become more independent. Once I got to like 17, 18, I was doing a lot of things on my own. I was driving, having that freedom of driving. My first trip was to a McDonald's drive-through with one of my friends. Started going to clubs, and I think I've talked about these things before, but there's that stage where you get to about 18 in the UK and everything changes. And that's where I really started to explore myself and become who I am. It was like breaking free and realizing I can be who I want to be. But one thing that's always stuck with me is the music. New and old, I still listen to the same style of music, and in a way, the way I dress, and my interests as well. So it just goes to show that so much was formed. We can change, we can mature, we can build careers, but there's always going to be a little bit of that teenager still in us. And I still try to let that teenager loose sometimes, particularly after a few beers. So this was fun. Thank you for listening to me today. I know this was all about me. I hope you don't mind, but I feel like these stories might invoke some memories for you. I'd love to hear a bit about what your childhood and teenage years were like growing up in your country. Good or bad, I'd be happy to share them in future episodes. And of course, if you would like to work with me on your pronunciation, share stories with me like this directly, whilst getting corrected on your pronunciation, I have a pronunciation course, which I've talked about already with the WhatsApp included. I do private lessons as well. And of course, if you're an actor, get in touch and we can work together on your goals on that front as well. So thank you so much. I will see you in the next one. Cheers, guys. Bye.